Okay. Okay. This episode was written by Gene Roddenberry, but was originally penned by Larry Brody. I'm going to explain that in just a moment here. But if the name Larry Brody doesn't sound familiar to you, he's done a decent amount of writing over his years. This was actually one of his earliest scripts when he was just getting into it. But much, much, much later, he would return to work on an episode on Voyager called Tattoo. Yeah. Now, what's interesting here, Roddenberry is stated to have always wanted to have an episode where Enterprise met God. However, the NBC execs said no. So this time around, he was like, yeah, that was the original script, by the way. There was no Lucifer. Instead, it was supposed to be God. And so it's like, yeah, we're going to go meet him. It's going to be great. The executives at Filmation, because we already talked about that, said no. Now, what's funny about this, a little bit of an anecdote to give you a little bit of perspective on NBC mentalities around there. I know I said it in Filmation, but NBC was the one behind this. Mr. Brody was doing work on a show called Police Story. Now, there was going to be a scene where it was going to be implied or stated that the cop actually was making love to his wife, being intimate with his wife. They said, no, that's not allowed. Unrelated statement. They all said it was totally okay for a cop to be intimate or have sex with a mistress that he was cheating on his wife with. Now, I bring this up because apparently in this episode they said, no, you cannot show God on television. You can show Satan, though. That's totally cool. I don't get it either. It's speaking as a longtime game, person, we had this same general problem in the 80s with regards to Nintendo of America and their strange censorship policies. And I don't even mean like Puritan. I mean, it's just weird, the things that they were okay with and the things they were not. For a while there, the word kill and the word die were not even allowed in Nintendo games. Anyways, although I do think, game overing someone just sounds cooler, but that's just me. So, this leads me to 2 points, though, because this episode sucked. Can I just say that? This episode sucks. Okay, we're done. Now, let's move forward, because this episode gives me evidence for 2 theories I've been kind of tossing around a little bit here, and I'm just adding these onto the pile. Theory number 1. Roddenberry was really excited about this show. Not just because of the whole God thing, but because now, they wanted to do magic in Star Trek before, but they just couldn't. They didn't have the tech. They didn't have the special effects. But now, with animation, they could. And you get where I'm going with this. If you've been following through on this series, I've already been talking about how Roddenberry seemed to be so excited to use this tool he wasn't allowed to use before that he wasn't using it properly. You'll notice that the level of, I don't know what else to call it, special effects in this episode is higher than any other previous one up to date. That certainly seems to collude with that idea. But there's another thing that happened. So Larry Brody wrote this episode, right? Kind of. Now, the original idea was axed, so then he rewrote it and restructured it. And he sent it in, and he only talked to Fontana about this. And Fontana said, Roddenberry loves your script and everything's awesome. It's cool. He's going to do a few minor rewrites. Now, Brody was, again, young and early in his career, so he didn't know what that meant. So he goes home, and he doesn't find out until the episode actually comes out that the episode was almost entirely rewritten. According to him, every single line of dialogue was changed by Roddenberry. He apparently confronted Fontana about this, and she said, oh yeah, he loved your script, and it's just, he wanted to rewrite it. What? Now, I want you to keep that in mind, because that means Roddenberry is the one who wrote all the dialogue on this script. And I've said it before, Roddenberry doesn't do good scripts. I've held that opinion firmly for many years. It's also probably worth noting that this then colludes with the second theory I mentioned earlier, that Roddenberry was heavily rewriting so many of these scripts, and doing so in a way that he probably shouldn't have been. Larry Brody got full credit. He got full, like, all the stuff you're supposed to get as a writer. It was fully in compliance with guild rules and all that fun stuff. But it shouldn't have been, because it wasn't his script. It wasn't his dialogue. Someone else wrote that. But Roddenberry just kind of kept his name off things. In other words, he was kind of going under the hood, under the table, actually, would be a better way to put this. He was going under the table to try and effectively write his own show, while doing so in a way that could be argued to be unethical and was almost assuredly illegal at the time. Why is this relevant? Season 1 of TNG. Now, if you've heard me talk about I'm not going to rehash that. I've talked about Season 1 TNG more than once. I talked about it in TNG and TOS. Not rehashing that. The point is, I feel like this is kind of the establishment and further reiteration of the pattern of how this man operates. Smiles to your face and then stabs you in the back. And more than willing to get his hands dirty. Whether that's good or bad, you can go ahead and make your own case on that. I just wanted to mention it. So, the Enterprise is going to the center of the galaxy. I love how casual this is. I mean, we've already had casual time travel just for the sake of historical things. But now they're casual, like, yeah, let's just go to the beginning of the galaxy. There we go. Is that a giant head over there? No, it's an alien life form that's being tossed out of the universe. Oh, okay. This is, they get drawn in at warp 10, they actually specifically mentioned, which means it's salamander time. And they get pushed out into another dimension where the natural laws don't apply, and I can't even begin to explain how much this doesn't make sense. So let's just give this one a pass and move on. Because then we find out that there's godlike aliens. As I talked about going through Season 3 of TOS, I really had no idea just how much they hit that godlike aliens button. But here we are again, and they're from Earth. Again. This is, 4 separate godlike aliens that are part of Earth's history at this point? Am I miscounting? That might actually be higher than that, because it's apparently the vacation spot. Are you an energy being? Are you bored of infinite power and having to constantly play chess with your opponent, knowing which move he's about to make? Fear not. We've got the place for you. Earth. It's filled with disease, mud, and war. It's the perfect vacation spot. Earth. Book your place today. I don't know. Okay. Now, I want to show my work, because that's kind of how I do. There's a scene, I've talked about how bad the voice acting is, and it continues to be bad. I just haven't commented on it again, because it's just still bad, right? Except for Uhura. And like a few occasional scenes where like Kirk was okay in the Tribbles episode. But here, there's a bit where it actually makes me laugh because it's so bad. This is so bad it's funny territory, I'll admit that. There's this bit where Kirk is like completely wigged out and not even maintaining coherent form. He says, Lucian, do something. I'm sorry, because his voice should probably be something more along the lines of, Lucian, do something. But he's just so calm. Like, I'm so upset about this. Please repair my damaged molecules. The pain is so terrible. Did he turn into an Elcor? With great horror and terrifying agony, please repair my molecular structure. Oh my God, the pain. Alright. Now, this whole episode sucks. Well, that's not quite true, because then what immediately follows is actually a surprisingly interesting insight into their culture. We get 3 little tidbits. First, everyone's a specialist in something, but they don't collude with each other. I keep using that word today. I don't know why. They don't work together. They don't share. It's just, you're really good at this, and you're really good at this, and so you do this, and you do this. And there's no cross-genre stuff, right? That's actually kind of an interesting and almost fascinating look at stagnation, because it's not true stagnation, but you could see how that would massively curtail a society and the burgeoning civilization. In fact, one might even argue that would qualify these people for not having civilization, for instead simply having existence. A group of people who happen to be living in conjunction, not in conjunction, nearby each other, but not being in conjunction, not actually forming a society. Just interesting to think about. And you can see some shades of the Q here, too, because if you pay attention, each Q has their own little kind of specialties, too. Oh, yeah, by the way, thought makes reality. So obviously this is now, where no one has gone before. And Earth is put on, the crew is put on trial for the crimes of humanity. So, encounter at Farpoint. The more I look at TAS, the more I see the bones of TNG Season 1 in it. That's not a compliment. But it makes sense, because from what I said earlier, remember how Roddenberry was just, we gotta use this tool, and how he insisted on rewriting everything, even, not taking credit for it? It feels like Roddenberry wanted to make... Okay, so let me rewind a second. One of the things I talked about, this is a theory, is that in TNG Season 1, Roddenberry was so... violently, he remembered how much pushback and how much difficulty he had making Season 1 and parts of Season 2 of TOS. And he, of course, wasn't even involved in Season 3, so he doesn't even get part of that. But point being, he was like, ugh. And now, with TNG, he was finally given the opportunity to make the show he wanted to. The limiters were off, and he could do his thing, finally. I'm starting to think that this is where that actually started. That the limiters were off with TAS, and he was able to make his show and do his thing. With limitations, obviously. He still had to go under the table to make certain things happen, and he was using animation and an extremely cheap company to do it. But this was like the prototype or the beta for that, it feels like. And I'm not just talking about the fact that so many of these episodes could pretty much directly be paralleled to Season 1 TNG episodes. I mean, just the general tone of it, and everything I've read about the behind-the-scenes aspect. Not that I like the man at all. My opinion of Roddenberry has done nothing but plummet the more I've studied Star Trek. But I can sympathize with the idea. The concept of being so limited in what you can do is something I understand very well. There's a reason you see me sitting here talking to a camera in a just barely developed studio that's in my bedroom. I don't actually have a bedroom. This is I've turned the bedroom space into my office. My bed's out in the living room. This is the limitations that I work with, and this is how I do everything I can to make this as professional as I can. I actually have real studio lights here, and I've got this whole sound canceling thing going on, and I've got the nice microphone, and I've got the padding on the desk, and I do everything I can to make this as good as I can, but the limitations that are constantly put upon me just make me go, Hurr! I feel like I'm constantly just straining against them, so I can understand the feeling. If suddenly it was just limitations are off, I'd be like, oh God, there's so many things I want to do. Anyways, so Spock uses magic, and there's a big magic duel between Kirk and Asmodeus. And they're put on trial for the crimes, but it's okay. And then they find out that they're cool, and there's a wah-wah at the end. The end. One last point I just have to comment on, because this amuses me. At one point, Kirk is told, he's pulled on the stand. He's all right, Kirk, prove that you're not horrible anymore. And Kirk says, Prime Directive. Okay, I'm paraphrasing a little. He actually calls it General Order 1, but he does literally point to the Prime Directive as an example of how humanity is so much better than it was before. I get where you're coming from, but this was an interesting episode to discuss, entirely from the behind-the-scenes perspective. The actual episode's drag. It's so bad it's good. It's like Spock's brain. That's actually one of the reasons why I can't give it lamentation status. I actually thought it would be, walking into it. We haven't walked into a lamentation yet, and if this isn't a lamentation, we may not get one. I mean, it's not like there's a guarantee. It doesn't work that way. We could have an entire show that lacks a lamentation, and this was the only one I was predicting. I'm going to go ahead and ask you right now, do you think there'll be a lamentation in the future? Because I don't know the rest of TAS all that well. I suppose we will all find out together next time, and over the next, month or however long this is. 3 months, I guess? Something like that.